I'm your host Tahir Gora in Candid Talk at TAC TV. Today I'm joined with a fellow anchor at TAC TV, Mr. Mayank Bhatt.
Thank you.
And Mayank does a beautiful show for TAC TV, Living Multiculturalism.
Yes.
And Mayank, today we are talking in context of your novel, Belief, because it is about living multiculturalism. This novel is about complexities of living multicultural together in a society like Canadian society. And the landscape of this novel is Mississauga and the whole Canada eventually. So first of all, congratulations on your first landmark novel. And how do you feel about this new initiative in terms of emerging as a promising writer?
First of all, let me thank you, Tahir, for having me here. I think it's remarkable for TAC TV to engage in this debate. Let me briefly talk about my show. The show began because of you. It was not my idea, it was your idea. And we have done, I think, very well over the last 1 year, interviewing different writers from different ethnic backgrounds, working as writers in Canada. So, thank you for that.
Welcome, and it's a common initiative, in fact.
And then, about the book, I actually began writing the book when I came here. You know my background. I used to be a journalist for many years in India. But when you come to a new country, you don't understand the country, but you want to write about something that engages you. And I used to work as a security guard at that time, and I used to do night shifts. You have nothing to do in night shifts. So I began to write a story. And I showed the story to the people who lived in the condo, and one of them suggested, there is a competition run by Diaspora Dialogues. Why don't you send the story there? I did. And fortunately for me, I was selected among the 20 writers who were selected out of some 250 entries. And the gift or the prize for that selection was that I could work with a Canadian author for 3 months to improve my story. And fortunately for me, that writer was M.G. Vasanji. So that is how I met Mr. Vasanji, and we worked initially for the first 3 months to improve the story. The story was published by Diaspora Dialogues in their collection annually called Talk. It was in Talk 5, I think, in 2010, which is when I thought that, why don't I develop this short story into a full-fledged novel. There were challenges, but again I went to Humber College, where again Vasanji was my mentor. I did a 1-year course and finished the basic manuscript, and then kept working on it for almost 3 or 4 years. It wasn't published for 2 years, it was ready in 2014. I could only find a publisher in 2016. So that's the background of the way in which the novel came about. But the novel deals with something that a lot of us only understand through headlines. And headlines, while they inform, they don't convey the complete picture. So we are talking about, a young boy or a young man suddenly deciding that he does not want to be part of this society and wants to create problems. We brand that as, a very easy label called terrorism. My novel tries to understand what happens to a family where something like this has happened or was about to happen. What are the causes behind something like this happening? Why does it happen? We are living in a society today where it seems to be happening almost every day. So, my novel is an attempt to understand this phenomenon. That's the basic definition that I can give of a novel.
So this novel, I agree with you, is not about terrorists. This novel is about a society.
Yes.
This novel is about stereotype imaginaries for each others.
Yes.
And you dealt it very well. But as you are living in Canada for the past, I would say, about 10 years now?
8 years.
8 years now. Have you observed any change in society since then?
I have two very basic observations to make. You understand the society probably better because you have been here better, and you have more interaction with the issues that I am dealing with in the book. But my own observation is based on two things. One is, when we talk of multiculturalism and we talk of an accepting society, at a very basic level it is true. Canada accepts you, Canada welcomes you, Canada wants you to be part of its, make Canada your home. But that is where it stops. It does not want you to understand you as a person, does not want to understand you as a cultural entity, does not understand the reason why you may have decided to come here, the fact that you want to integrate, but at the same time retain a certain level of your own individuality. So, these complexities are never understood. It is for people to make a serious attempt that when we talk of multiculturalism, it should not merely turn into a slogan. My culture, your culture is important to us because we are first generation immigrants. I want, I came to Canada because I want to be here. My family is here with me. My son is going to become a Canadian probably faster than I will ever become, and more comprehensively than I will ever become. But I don't want to lose my culture. I don't want to lose my cultural identity. And that is where the differences begin to arise. So, I think, and that is what my book deals with also. It's not just, that you're talking of terrorism. No. At several stages in the book, the family feels that it is not accepted. All of them are trying to adjust. All of them adjust, including the son. At a certain point, something goes wrong and he wants to rebel. When he realizes that the rebellion is going to be leading to something that he never foresees, he wants to come back, but he cannot, because the system will not let him come back. So, that is what the challenges of multiculturalism, that is what it is. We treat people, and I do it myself also perhaps unconsciously. We treat people from a perspective of preset ideas. You use the word stereotypes. I think it's a very, very valid point to make. I treat you as a stereotype, you treat me as a stereotype, the system treats us as a stereotype, and that is where we kind of fail.
But Mayank, as you use phrase or a tagline in your show, Living Multiculturalism, that multiculturalism is not a one way, it's all way thing.
Yes.
It is absolutely good to know about other cultures who are immigrating to Canada for rest of the Canadians, but also, is it not important for the newcomers or the new Canadians to know about the cultures that already exist in Canada?
Oh, most certainly, most certainly. I think it is vital. I'm of the view that if you decide to come to Canada, then you have mentally made that change, that you don't want to be, or you want to leave a certain part of your identity where it was and adopt a new identity. It's like, you change your clothes. It's changing your clothes and changing your mind. So, I completely believe, but to what extent should that be? To what extent should the state enforce it? These are issues of debate. A lot of people, a lot of times have argued, and we have differences on this also, is that a woman in a hijab is not Canadian. I have a view that no, that is Canadian. Canadian is not how you dress, Canadian is how you behave, Canadian is how you act, Canadian is how well you integrate into the society. What is your contribution beyond merely being a wage earner? I think those are issues that we need to deal with.
I agree with you. I have no issue personally that women in hijab is Canadian. She is Canadian. And you added very well that how the person behaves then. And I don't even object how the person behave. When we talk about Canadian core values, it's not about dress. I may not agree about niqab because that conceals identity. But I have no issue with hijab. Either is hijab on Muslim women's head, or is kind of some head covering on any other religious community. I have no issue with that. But when it comes to Canadian core values, it's all about how we respect each other.
Yes.
So if a woman with hijab is respected by a woman in bikini, then the women in hijab should have a respect for a woman in bikini as well.
Oh, absolutely.
It's not a one-way traffic.
It can never be. No, you're right.
You know, so that stereotype is dangerous.
Oh, yes.
That is the point where people like myself speak up.
No, and you're right. You're absolutely right.
I mean, it's not, multiculturalism does not mean that you being a different welcomed by others, but you are not ready to welcome others.
Or accept.
Yes. It's not about tolerating each other. It's about accepting each other, but with the Canadian core values. And when someone asks me, this is a very ongoing debate these days. Our Prime Minister has reflected on diversity, and one very prominent candidate from Conservative Party leadership race, Ms. Kelly Leach, said that Canadian values, and then everybody gets caught up in that kind of a political correctness, and no one wants to speak up about the facts. That, in my humble opinion, Canadian values are number one, gender equality. No matter you wear hijab, no matter you go to beach in a bikini, there should be gender equality. That's my take on Canadian value. The other Canadian value is no minority in Canada. Everyone is equal. The third Canadian value, in my opinion, is individual freedom, and so on. These are not Westerners' things.
No.
These are human things.
These are human rights.
Human rights, and with the evolution of human perception about different matters, if we stick, all of us, even if we stick on these three basic things, in my humble opinion, that individual freedom, gender equality, we will be okay.
Oh yes.
But the issue is, apparently these look very small things. Gender equality. All of us would say, oh, we all believe in gender equality. But then the question arises, do you really? What do you see in the society in that context? What is your opinion?
You know, there are two or three, and let me begin by saying that I agree with everything that you said. Because I think the core basis for any society is respect for human rights. That there should be no minorities, religious, racial, gender, these are issues that really don't belong to this century. So we need to be able to emerge out of our identities to have a common identity. How will that happen? We are all working towards it. And we have discussed this in the past also, that in Canada there used to be two solitudes, the French and the English. Over the last 100 years, it has become multiple solitudes, because you have different languages, different ethnicities. Are they all converging into one identity? I don't think so. Is that what we really want? Well, that's the debate that is going on right now. You mentioned Kylie Leach, and what she is talking about is interpreted quite differently by different people, right? Because this is politics, and it is going to happen. Politics will require different interpretations. One may agree, one may not agree. But what we need to commonly try and achieve is to establish core basic values which are applicable and acceptable to all Canadians, irrespective of their ethnic backgrounds. And I think that is what is the ultimate purpose. My book tries to deal with the subject where it is not happening. So, you are not treated the way you expect or you deserve to be treated, as a result of which not everybody goes crazy, quote unquote crazy, I would say. Some of them do, and there is no mechanism to hold them back and keep them with us. That's basically what the issue is right now.
While talking about complexities of multiculturalism, we see as writers, as you are an accomplished journalist and writer from India, and many of accomplished writers come to your show from Filipino background, from Turkish background, and also people who born here. I mean, my son, for instance, they are almost Canadian, as you said about your son, but they still inherit our cultural baggage, good things and some of the controversial things as well. What he writes, what he expresses, what my daughter sings as a singer, is that Canadian or is still South Asian or Filipino or Spanish? What do you think about that?
Tahir, I think we are very soon going to reach a certain level of what I feel is going to become global culture, which is going to be a mixture of so many different influences. It is dominated by Western culture, no doubt, because that is where the media is and media controls culture, unfortunately. But it's it has several components. It has many components. And I think that's for the good. That's for the good. I don't want to identify or categorize that culture as South Asian only or Canadian only. I think it's slowly evolving into a global culture. That's my take on it.
Like for instance, there are dozens Punjabi writers, good Punjabi writers, they write in Punjabi, but they live in Canada. They reflect Canadian life in Punjabi language.
Yes.
As is the case in many other languages
Yes.
that come through immigrants to Canada. But still the system, our Canadian system particularly, does not recognize that literature, Canadian literature.
Which is very unfortunate, and you are right. I did one panel discussion on South Asian theatre recently, and I had a very important Urdu playwright, Javed Danish, with me as one of the panelists. And I had other panelists also who write in English. Javed writes in Urdu, and everybody on the panel was able to get grants because they write in English, unlike Javed, whose body of work includes a lot of plays about Canadian about Canadian society, is not able to get grants because nobody is reading Urdu, right? So this is a very important problem. I openly say it's a problem.
Yes.
Because if we are not going to be, multiculturalism should mean that you are going to understand multiple languages. Not everything should be only in English. I think and I don't know what the solution to this is really, but you're right.
And also when we talk about multiculturalism, there is another issue what Canadian society and many Western societies are unable to understand. They mix culture with the religion.
Yes.
I understand that sometimes some of the religious things go along with culture, but some of the religious things don't go along with culture. For instance, as we come from India. So from India, like Christians in India, they are more closer to us, not because of their faith, because of the common culture.
Yes.
So these are the things we as journalists and writers need to translate to this society so that this society could understand that there is a vast difference between culture and religion.
You gave me that example, and I wanted to give that example again.
Right.
About that Bhatti.
Yes.
Last name.
Yes.
Yeah?
Yeah. I mean, in my show, in Punjabi talk show, I had 4 Bhatti. Mr. Peter Bhatti, he's a Christian Punjabi. Mr. Mahinder Bhatti, he is a Hindu Punjabi. And Manjeet Bhatti is a Sikh Punjabi, and Anwar Bhatti is a Muslim Punjabi. So the last name Bhatti for all 4 different faith people, but culturally they are one.
They're one.
They share their jokes.
Which proves your point, that language and culture are 2 different things.
Right. So language and culture sometimes 2 different things, but also language and cultures, they go hand in hand.
Yes, yes. No, I think culture is a bigger entity, bigger, how do I say, a bigger bracket which includes languages.
Absolutely.
So
absolutely.
when I always talk of South Asian culture, there is no Hindu culture or Muslim culture. I think there is a confluence of many cultures that make the South Asian identity.
Right. Right. For instance, like Diwali. Diwali is basically a religious thing, but it has become more cultural.
Oh, yes.
As we see now. Christmas, it is more cultural than
Yes.
the religious.
Yes.
Diwali is being celebrated among South Asians, no matter Hindu, Christians, Sikh, Muslims.
Yes.
But Diwali is not truly celebrated among Pakistani South Asians because they are not used to live with their Hindu counterparts for a long time now. But here in Canada,
Yes.
Diwali is now a Canadian culture. Eid is a Canadian culture.
Oh yes, oh yes.
So culture is a big thing. Little rivers are the streams.
Yes.
They come and finally get into
But
ocean.
that is the question. Should they all come into one river? Should they all come into one, or should they maintain and run parallelly? I don't know. I don't have an answer.
I have a different perception. They have their different streams.
Yes.
And those streams go to one big river, excuse me, or fall in the ocean, but they still maintain their streams.
Yeah.
And then there is an open end
Yes.
where one can see all falling together and
Yes.
mixing with each other. It's kind of a fusion.
And pertinently, that is what my book also talks about. The family originally is from Bombay, Mumbai. They come to Canada in the mid-90s after the riots that happened in Bombay after the demolition of the Ayodhya Masjid. And they are very secular family. They although they are Muslims,
Right.
they have a background in trade unions. So and they come from a society in Bombay which is extremely secular in its belief, in its behavior, in the way in which they live. But when they begin to find lack of acceptance here, the father's character remains very secular, but is aloof, is detached from the world, gets more and more disillusioned with what is happening. But the mother, on the other hand, turns extremely religious, more so than what she used to be in India. And that is the change that I see in a lot of people here. In new immigrants, when they come with a certain kind of mindset which is very different from what they become maybe 10, 12 years after they have lived in Canada. So at a certain level, I think Canadian society expects you to adhere to a certain kind of identity. It is for you to choose whether you want to be a South Asian, or whether you want to be an Indian, or whether you want to be a Pakistani or a Bangladeshi. For me, I think it's important to be identified as a Canadian South Asian. So that's what my attempt in the book has been.
Right. You said you want to be identified as a Canadian South Asian.
Yes.
So Canadian first, South Asian later.
Yes.
It's kind of a hyphenated thing. So as we hear
Yes.
this phenomenon.
I cannot get rid of my South Asian heritage. I do not wish to. At the same time, I am very, very conscious that I want to become more and more Canadian as my progress in Canada, kind of goes longer. So in the first 5 years, maybe I wasn't as Canadian even mentally. Then I am in my 8th year in Canada, and I would imagine that in the next 20 years, I would probably be absolutely Canadian, and very little of South Asia is in me.
I may differ with this phrase. Personally, I feel that I am South Asian as well, but I feel that being South Asian is being Canadian as well.
Okay, explain.
Probably I don't need to get rid of my South Asian culture, because my South Asian culture is becoming Canadian culture as well. As we see Diwali being celebrated by, not just politically, by a prime minister. By
I agree.
You know,
No, Tahir, I want to make just one point. Just one point. I am aware of all the celebrations about festivities of South Asia. As a Canadian, I need to also be aware of other culture. I don't
Absolutely.
know anything about Filipino celebrations. I don't know anything about, let's say, I don't know, maybe Armenians. You know, there are lots of people from Armenia here. I don't know anything about those cultures. And I think that is a lack in me as a Canadian. That lack, you know, that's something that I need to fill out
Yes.
later.
No, you are absolutely right. Actually, this is a problem. When your show, Living Multiculturalism, tags a line that multiculturalism is not one way. That's where problem lies, when some of the communities think that only accept us or only know about us. We are not here to know about you.
You, yes. No.
That is the problem.
Oh yes. But I am equally guilty of that problem.
No.
I am not contributing to a solution by keeping myself oblivious of the other cultures.
No, you are not actually, I would not say that you are guilty, because you recognize the need to know and understand each other.
Yes.
It's all about resources, it's all about time we find in our busy life. But as long as we are concerned and we are curious to know each other, not just curious, to work and celebrate each other, I would say.
No, but you know that is where you make a big difference.
Right.
As Tag TV, nobody thought of this before. Nobody thought that you need in Canada a platform for multiculturalism in the media, right? We have seen in the last 8 years, I have seen, you've been here even longer, that people deal with their own cultural identities and ethnicities and cater to them through the media that will appeal to them. You are trying to do an experiment which I think is brave, and it needs to be complimented, to create a platform for every ethnicity that you can think of. You know, it's an open invitation. You come and do what you want. I have a platform for you. So I think that is where you can be passively aware of a problem and do nothing, or you can be like you and create a platform. Okay, come, I'm calling you here. If you were not here, then my show would not have been anywhere, right? Mainstream Canada does not have place for me. So that, I think we all need to think in terms of what can we do, and that is really the crux to the problem.
Yes, you are right, and it's not about to know each other, it's not about to respect each other, it's about to celebrate each other.
Yes.
It is important.
Yes.
And when it comes to that spirit,
Yes.
that we really want to celebrate each other,
Yes.
then it's a real model of multiculturalism.
Yes.
Otherwise, talking or recognizing each other's at political levels or by media means or through any other effort is okay, but is not the real spirit.
No.
So you are celebrating each other's cultures in your show,
Yes.
Living Multiculturalism.
Yes.
You are doing your enough efforts to celebrate Turkish, Armenian, Jewish, Irish, Filipino, and
Yes.
all sorts of literary works. So how do you feel that?
You know, what made me kind of aware to the possibility of the show was our discussion, and then also the fact that over the last 6-7 years, I have been moving in circles where I come across a lot of people like me, who are relatively new. I've been here 8 years. I cannot call myself a newcomer anymore because I'm a Canadian citizen. But they all began like me. They used to work in their own respective countries. We had very established careers, gave up all that, came here, are trying to establish themselves here, but are not forgetting their creative, effort, their creative talent, and they're trying to do something with that talent. So I thought, I'm not alone. My hardship is not just my own. There are hundreds of people like me who are also facing the same situation, the same kind of life, and are still struggling with their creation. You are also one of them, right? I was very happy to talk to you on my show, and I think that required a platform. So, I needed to bring out that talent that you have, and I am just talking of Toronto. Imagine what is the potential of a show like this when we go across Canada from coast to coast to coast, right? So, that is what we are trying to do.
Yes, you are spot on, Mayank. So, in our evolving society, what do you think from government sector, from public sector, from arts organizations such as Canada Arts Council, Ontario Arts Council, how could we make possible to understand each other in a better way? Because these big organizations, Trillier Foundation and all those, they are doing a lot, but still there is a need to do things in a more efficient and productive way.
Oh yes, no doubt.
So what is your take on?
I have given a long thought to this, and I think there are basically 2 or 3 issues that need to be understood in this context. One is, how are you going to define or categorize art? By art I mean everything, literature is included in that. Is it going to be language specific? So, then is it going to be only French and English that you will treat as art, or is Punjabi also considered? And what you need to understand is that Punjabi is a very, very prevalent and growing language in this country, right? I believe it's the second or the third largest spoken language in Canada. You would probably know better about this. So, are we going to give recognition to these languages also? And if we are not going to do that, then is there any reason why we are not going to do it? I think in my view, we need to recognize languages as equal to English. I come from India. In India, we have an official language which is Hindi, but English is prevalent because English is the link language. I think the same effort should be here also to recognize the multiple languages that Canada has, and it's a great tradition to have. Make English and French as the link languages, give them the status that they need, but encourage other languages. Once you begin to understand that other languages are also equally, if not more creative, and there is a lot that is happening in those languages, then I think structurally you will begin to understand that grants do not have to necessarily go only to a specific or 2 specific languages. That I think will bring about a major shift in the way we think of culture. A lot of this in my book deals with the fact that they are not accepted as Canadians. Why are they not accepted as Canadians? Is because they speak language with an accent. They have a lot of experience, none of that is being recognized here. So, it is not just economic sense of alienation that people have. Economic sense of alienation can be got rid of, because when I came here, I worked as a security guard. I could run my family for whatever meager means I had. It is the absence of acceptance of you as a cultural person and equating you to something that is very barbaric, which I think really begins to hurt people who have been here long enough to have experienced that. The younger generation is not going to accept that. So, they have 2 choices, either they go completely Canadian and forget about their own background and roots, or they go completely this direction and completely reject Canadian culture. And I think both the options are wrong.
But the third thing is evolving, which is quite natural as we are talking about that third phenomena, is about kind of a mixed phenomena. That streams are coming, different streams are coming, but they are falling into one ocean. And that one ocean is very colorful ocean, having cultures and colors from all people who live in Canada. So, in that ocean perspective, don't you think that the problem for new generation would be resolved?
That what happens then in any situation like this is all the colors get mixed. So you are still not talking about the Canadian identity, right? You're talking more of the melting pot of America. When you go to America, you become American. Then you don't remain Indian at all. You are in a melting pot. So every identity goes into it and then comes out as the American identity. Is that what we want as a model? I'm not sure. I would be okay with that. I would be okay if there is only one Canadian identity and everybody kind of just goes into it and comes out as a new identity. Fine, but that's not happening. That's unlikely to happen, right? So then, what is the solution? We are in this kind of midway stream where we are neither going that way or this way.
No, I'm talking about some model as we see in India, for instance, because this new phenomena of multiculturalism is quite new in Canada.
Yes.
Let's talk about Bombay, for instance, or Bombay, whatever we call the city is. Over there, Eid is being celebrated by everybody.
Yes.
Christmas is being celebrated by everybody.
Yes.
Diwali is being celebrated by everybody, no matter who, Muslim, Hindu, Christians.
Yeah,
so I'm talking about that phenomena. This kind of a thing we are able to see here in Canada, particularly in Greater Toronto area, that now even Irish Canadian knows what Eid is about.
Oh yes.
Even Polish Canadians know what Diwali is about. So I'm talking about that ocean, where different colors remain their colors, but they are running
and you're right. You're
together.
Right. You're right. But I don't disagree with you, but I just want to make one finer point here is that for India to evolve into this multicultural entity that it is, it's taken several hundreds of years of experimentation, right? It's not something that happened in like 50 years. It's not something that happened in 100 years. It's a constant evolution that is constantly challenged even today. And yet that level of maturity persists across the population, where they say that no, we have this Indian identity, which is a confluence of everything. It may take a very long time for us to reach that level in Canada. But you made another point which I find very interesting and relevant, is the younger generation. Maybe there is a third way where you are, retaining your identity as well as contributing to Canada. And I see a lot of mixed racial, mixed religious couples who are very young and who do not consider either race, gender or religion as any issues that affect their identity, which I think is a very positive sign. But there are two sides to the coin always.
Yes, as we are talking about complexities of multiculturalism, and my take and probably your take is same, that a third option, not the option, the natural process for younger generation to find their ways and other ways together is to celebrate each other cultures. It's not kind of something that we do something, I would say, intentionally, but naturally. Like a friend, his birthday on Christmas, and the guy is Hindu. So mixing Christmas and Hindu cultures together. It's a kind of a natural way.
Yes.
That would probably lead us to
Yes. Yes.
some new era.
Yes. In my ideal world, there would be, marriages have to necessarily be across different religions and different cultures. That is the way I want the world to be, because then eventually in about 100 years you will have no religion.
That's what Michael Adams probably talked about in his book, Sex in the Snow.
Okay, I'm not aware of
Yeah,
this.
when he talks about multiculturalism here in Canada, which is a very cold country. So Mayank, thank you very much. In the end, I would like to know your opinion about what is Canadian literature. Again, we are talking about this thing. Is that literature being written only in English and French? or a literature that is written in Hindi, Punjabi, Filipino, Spanish, and talk about Canada or Canadian life, Canadian landscape, or a literature Hindi, Punjabi, Spanish, written by Canadian Punjabi writers or Spanish writers, but talk about their back homes?
Yeah, I think there is no easy answer to this question. Established canon of Canadian literature is primarily English and to a large extent French. I am unaware of that language, so I cannot comment on it. There is a lot of creative talent in English in Canada, which is flourishing right now and has flourished over the last 100 years. What is a new phenomenon and not yet completely recognized is the different languages in which literature is being created in Canada, writing about the Canadian society. I think that is the most important point that we need to understand. In my view, and I think it is a view that everybody needs to kind of understand, you can forever be nostalgic about your home country that you come from and write about it glowingly. Are you contributing anything to understanding Canadian society and your own ethnicity unless you begin to write about that in the language that you understand and the people you want to understand? I think that is the core issue, and which is where I think your novel that you recently published makes a big contribution. Although I do not read Urdu, from what I have heard and from what we have discussed, I think it is important for people to understand and recognize that in Urdu language, here is a book that discusses who the new Canadians are. So, that I think is literature also, and increasingly that will be the more important literature in this country.
Thank you, Mayank. Thank you for wonderful chat in context of your novel, Belief.
Thank you, Tahir, for having me here.
Which helps us understand complexities of multiculturalism as well as how to live together in a very new phenomena here in Canada at least,
yes,
called multiculturalism.
Thank you. Thank you, Tahir.
And viewers, thank you for watching my show Candid Talk. Today I had a special talk with our fellow anchor, Mayank Bhatt. Stay tuned.
#1 multicultural channel. This is TAG TV.